Hello, my dear friends. You are standing before a towering wall of sun-baked, rose-gold earth. The air around you is thick, heavy with the scent of spices, hot dust, roasting meat, and something else, something less pleasant that clings to the back of your throat. 100 different conversations in a language you don't understand buzz around you like a swarm of bees, punctuated by the braying of a donkey and the rhythmic clang of a coppersmith's hammer. This is the dizzying, chaotic, vibrant reality of a 17th century Moroccan city. And honestly, given the state of sanitation and medicine, it's a miracle you've made it this far. You probably wouldn't survive the week. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, imagine yourself there, just for a moment. Feel the oppressive heat radiating from the packed earth street beneath your thin leather slippers. See the swirl of color and humanity. You are about to step out of this world and into another. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. A heavy cedar wood door, studded with iron, groans open before you. You don't step through it so much as you are pulled in by a sudden, dramatic shift in the very atmosphere. The world outside, with its noise and its grit and its suffocating heat, simply vanishes. It's as if a thick, velvet curtain has dropped behind you, muffling all sound. The air here is instantly cooler, gentler, alive with the soft whisper of unseen leaves and the hypnotic trickle of water. But what truly stuns you, what makes you stop in your tracks and inhale deeply, is the smell. It's an intoxicating wave of perfume, so dense you can almost taste it. It's the sweet, honeyed fragrance of orange blossoms, the heady perfume of jasmine climbing unseen walls, the clean, sharp scent of mint crushed underfoot, and the damp, loamy smell of rich, dark earth. You've left the chaotic city behind and entered a masterpiece of design. This is the Riad, the Moroccan palace garden, a vision of paradise on earth. The pathways are laid in intricate geometric patterns of blue and white tile, shimmering in the filtered sunlight. Everything is ordered, symmetrical, and breathtakingly beautiful. It feels like a sanctuary, a place of peace and contemplation, a world away from the struggle and squalor just outside that massive wall. But let's linger on that wall for a moment, and let's think about that stunning, all-encompassing perfume. You see, the glamorous illusion here is that this garden is a simple aesthetic choice, a display of wealth and a love for nature. It's a poet's dream, a lover's retreat. The shocking reality is that this garden, and specifically its overwhelming fragrance, is a form of biological warfare. That wall isn't just keeping people out. It's trying, desperately, to keep a smell in. The beautiful scent of orange blossoms is not a romantic luxury. It's a defensive weapon. Because the truth of the city you just left is a stench so profound, so dangerous, that the people living inside this palace believe it can kill them. Outside the perfumed wall, there is no concept of sanitation as you would know it. The narrow, winding streets are open sewers. Butchers throw blood and entrails into the gutters. Tanneries dump chemical and animal waste. People toss their household refuse, including their own bodily waste, directly into the streets where it mixes with the dung of hundreds of donkeys, mules, and camels. It all bakes under the relentless Moroccan sun, creating a foul, invisible fog. This is the why. In the 17th century, the prevailing medical wisdom is the miasma theory. Doctors and scholars believe that diseases of plague, cholera, fevers of every kind are not spread by germs, which they don't know exist, but by miasma or bad air. They are convinced that foul odors carry sickness, that to inhale the stench of decay is to invite death into your very lungs. So, this garden is not just a rich man's whim. It is a fortress against a foul-smelling, invisible enemy. The Sultan and his court are living in a perfumed bubble, a desperate attempt to purify the very air they breathe. The sheer volume of fragrant plants, the acres of orange and lemon trees, the walls draped in jasmine, the beds of roses, verbena, and mint are all cultivated with an almost paranoid intensity. They are fighting a war against the smell of their own city. The garden is less an artistic statement and more of a giant, floral gas mask. Every beautiful scent is a soldier in an endless battle against the ever-present threat of disease-ridden air. Your lungs, now filled with this clean, sweet perfume, draw you further in, pulled by the promise of coolness, by the gentle, melodic sound of splashing water from the fountain at the garden's heart. It sounds so pure, so life-giving and refreshing, but purity, you're beginning to suspect, is a very carefully constructed illusion here. Your feet carry you forward, almost of their own accord, following the gentle slope of a tiled path toward the center of this fragrant paradise. The sound of trickling water grows louder, a multi-layered melody of soft splashes, gurgles and drips that promises relief from even the memory of the city's heat. You emerge from under the shade of a cypress tree into the main courtyard, and there it is, the heart of the garden, the fountain. It's a masterpiece of carved marble and intricate tilework, a multi-tiered star that anchors the entire space. Water wells up from a central spout, clear and impossibly bright, spilling over into a larger basin, then cascading through smaller channels into a great, turquoise-tiled pool at its base. The sun catches the spray, creating 1,000 tiny, fleeting rainbows. The reflection of the perfect blue sky shimmers on the water's surface, broken only by the lazy drift of a fallen orange blossom. Courtiers, robed in fine silks, stand near its edge, talking in low voices. One dips a silver cup into the pool, bringing it to his lips for a long, cool drink. This is the very image of life, purity, and abundance. In a land where water is the most precious of all commodities, this endlessly flowing fountain is the ultimate symbol of wealth, power, and divine favor. It is a taste of Jannah, the paradise promised in the Quran, brought to earth by a ruler of immense means. But as you watch that courtier drink, a small, unsettling thought takes root. Where does all this water come from? This isn't a natural spring. The shocking reality is that this beautiful, life-giving fountain is very likely a source of slow-acting poison. That water, which looks so pure and tastes so refreshing, is almost certainly teeming with invisible death. It began its journey miles away, diverted from a river or a spring into a network of man-made channels and aqueducts. And these channels are not the sterile, sealed pipes you know today. They are open-air canals, shallow troughs of stone or packed earth. As the water makes its slow, winding journey towards the palace, it serves as a public utility for everyone and everything it passes. Women wash their clothes in it. Children splash and play in it. A herder lets his goats and donkeys drink their fill, and they relieve themselves at its edge. The runoff from a nearby tannery, full of animal waste and harsh chemicals, might trickle down the hillside and join the flow. A dead rat, bloated and decaying, might bob along for a day or two before sinking. It is, in essence, a very long, very slow-moving public toilet. So why would they drink it? Why would they use this contaminated water for the ritual ablutions, the wudu, required before prayer? This is the why, and it's a terrifyingly simple logic. They are still living in the world of miasma theory you encountered at the gate. To them, the danger is in the smell. The water in the fountain doesn't stink. It has been aerated by the fountain's splashing, filtered through sand and gravel at some point, and it's moving. To their senses, it is clean. The concept of microscopic bacteria, of cholera and dysentery and giardia hiding in a clear, odorless liquid, is a fantasy as wild as a flying carpet. They have achieved an engineering miracle, a testament to their sophisticated understanding of hydraulics and gravity, to bring this water here. The focus is entirely on the monumental achievement of making water appear in the desert, a display of power so great it seems to bend the rules of nature. The quality of that water is a secondary, almost irrelevant detail, as long as it looks and smells pure. So, you stand there, watching the beautiful, deadly fountain. The water, used to wash hands and face before praying to God, is laced with pathogens. The refreshing drink on a hot day is a game of biological roulette. The entire glorious centerpiece of this garden paradise is a beautiful lie, a magnificent dispenser of disease. The irony is as thick as the perfume in the air. The garden is designed to protect its inhabitants from the bad air of the city, yet it invites them to drink from a stream of invisible sickness at its very core. As you look around at the people gathered here, you notice something else. Beyond the physical dangers of scent and water, there is another, more immediate threat. You see the watchful eyes of the guards, the stiff posture of the officials. There's a tension beneath the serene surface. This isn't just a place of relaxation. It's a stage. And you can feel the presence of the main actor, the Sultan, even if he remains unseen. His power radiates from every perfectly placed tile and trimmed hedge, and you get the distinct feeling that while the water might make you sick in a week, the Sultan's displeasure could end you in a second. You follow a shaded arcade, the columns wrapped in climbing jasmine, the air cool and still. The intricate tilework under your feet gives way to a path of soft, fine gravel that crunches gently with each step. You are moving deeper into the garden, into its more private, secluded areas. Here, the grand symmetry of the central court gives way to a more intimate design. Small, hidden seating areas are tucked into alcoves, screened by carved wooden lattices known as mashrabiyah. The air is thick with the scent of roses and the drowsy hum of bees. This is the inner sanctum, a place of quiet conversation and contemplation. You see a vizier, an important minister, seated on a pile of silk cushions, his face a mask of serene focus as he dictates a letter to a scribe. A poet leans against an ancient olive tree, eyes closed, perhaps composing a verse about the beauty surrounding him. The illusion is one of perfect tranquility, a haven where the great minds of the kingdom can escape the pressures of rule to think, to create, to govern with wisdom and grace. It's the intellectual and spiritual core of the palace, a place where power is exercised not with a sword, but with a thoughtful word. But then you see him. Or rather, you feel his presence first. A sudden stillness falls over the garden. The vizier stops talking mid-sentence. The poet's eyes snap open. All heads turn towards a far corridor. Emerging from the shadows is the Sultan himself, Moulay Ismail ibn Sharif. He is not a large man, but his presence fills the entire space. He moves with a silent, predatory grace, his expression unreadable. He is flanked by two towering guards, but the real source of the fear that ripples through the garden is the man himself. You notice that he carries a lance, its point sharpened to a needle-like tip. The shocking reality behind this tranquil, intellectual haven is that it is also a theatre of absolute, terrifying, and often whim-driven power. This garden, for all its beauty, is a place of execution. Moulay Ismail was a ruler of legendary brutality and volcanic temper, and he did not believe in delegating his justice. It was said he killed thousands. Some sources claim over 30,000 with his own hands during his long reign. The why is rooted in a brutal, but effective political philosophy. In the 17th century, the Alauid dynasty was still cementing its power. Morocco was a fractured land of rebellious tribes, rival warlords, and European interference. Moulay Ismail believed that the only way to forge a unified, stable nation was through absolute terror. Fear was his most effective tool of statecraft. His power had to be seen as divine, immediate, and utterly inescapable. There could be no long, drawn-out trials, no appeals. Justice had to be as swift and final as a lightning strike. What better place to demonstrate this than in the heart of his palace? To execute a courtier or a slave in the beautiful, serene garden sent a powerful message. There is no escape, not in the audience hall, not in the street, not even here, in paradise. His power is everywhere. So you watch, your own breath caught in your chest, as the Sultan approaches the vizier. The minister, who moments before looked like a powerful statesman, now looks like a frightened child. He prostrates himself, pressing his forehead to the gravel path. The Sultan looks down at him, his expression unchanging. He might be about to promote the man, to praise his work, or he might be about to run him through with his lance for some perceived slight, a misspoken word, or simply because he stumbled in his presence. The historical accounts are filled with stories of him killing servants for serving food that was too hot, or masons for looking at one of his wives. He once reputedly killed a man for simply adjusting his turban in the royal presence, seeing it as an act of vanity. In this garden, life and death hang on the mood of a single man. The fragrant air, the gentle hum of bees, the sublime beauty of it is merely the backdrop for a constant, terrifying performance of absolute power. The serene illusion is shattered by the stark reality that this paradise is also an abattoir, and the gardener holds a blade to every throat. As you watch this tense tableau, you can't help but think about the sheer amount of work it must take to maintain such a perfect place. Who clips these hedges? Who pulls these weeds? Who lays these tiles? And you begin to suspect that the story of their lives is not nearly as beautiful as the garden they tend. You pause along this gravel path, taking in the scene. The perfection is almost unnerving. Not a single weed dares to sprout between the meticulously laid terracotta tiles that edge the flower beds. The cypress trees are sculpted into perfect cones, their dark green forms a stark, geometric statement against the bright sky. The hedges that create the maze like private spaces are trimmed with a precision that seems impossible, their surfaces as flat and smooth as a tabletop. The gentle breeze rustles the leaves of a nearby pomegranate tree, and a few crimson blossoms drift down, landing on the path. You watch them for a moment, and then you realize that within minutes, a silent figure in a simple tunic will appear, whisk them away with a broom made of reeds, and vanish as quietly as he came. The garden presents an illusion of serene, self-sustaining order. It feels as though it simply is, as though it was born this way and maintains its own perfection through some kind of natural magic. It's a space designed to feel effortless, a divine creation that requires no human toil, only admiration. But that, of course, is the most profound illusion of all. The shocking reality is that this effortless beauty is built on a foundation of unimaginable human suffering. This garden is not maintained by a few happy horticulturalists. It is the product of a massive, brutal, and ceaseless campaign of forced labor. For every perfect hedge, there is the ache in 1,000 backs. For every clean-swept path, there is the sting of the overseer's whip. The workforce is a vast and miserable army, composed largely of captives. There are the tens of thousands of European Christians captured by Morocco's infamous Barbary corsairs, sailors and merchants and travellers now condemned to a life of hard labour under the African sun. And then there is the even larger contingent of black slaves, captured in sub-Saharan Africa and marched north in brutal coffles, to be bought and sold and put to work on the Sultan's endless grand projects. These are the unseen hands. From before dawn until after dusk, they toil. You don't see them from these pleasant, shaded walkways, but they are here. You can imagine them now, just beyond a wall or over a rise. Men, covered in dust and sweat, digging the irrigation channels that feed the fountains, using nothing but rudimentary shovels in their bare hands. You can picture them hauling the immense blocks of marble and stone needed for the pavilions and pathways, straining under the weight, their muscles screaming. You can see them mixing the lime mortar, pounding the earth for the walls, their bodies little more than cogs in a giant, pitiless machine. The beautiful geometry of the garden is drawn on a canvas of human misery. The why for this is simple and chilling. It is the logic of empire and absolute power. To a ruler like Moulay Ismail, these people are not people. They are a resource, as plentiful and as disposable as the clay in the earth. His goal was to build a capital, Mekins, that would rival the glorious Versailles of his contemporary, Louis Ziv of France. He was engaged in a project of monumental self-aggrandizement, a physical manifestation of his own power. Grand visions require grand labour forces, and in the 17th century, slavery and conquest were the most efficient means of acquiring one. There was no concept of workers' rights, no thought for their well-being. Their exhaustion, their sickness, their deaths were simply calculated losses, the cost of doing business. The state, embodied in the Sultan, was everything. The individual, especially a captive or a slave, was nothing. The sheer scale of it is hard to comprehend. The walls of Mekins, the city this garden is a part of, are over 25 miles long. The stone and marble were quarried and transported by this slave army. The stables, built to house 12,000 horses, were constructed by them. This garden is just one small, beautiful part of a vast landscape of forced labour. The effortless perfection you see is a carefully curated stage set, and the suffering of the stagehands is intentionally kept hidden from the audience. But now that you know, the garden looks different. The whisper of the leaves sounds less like peace and more like sighs. The brilliant green of the hedges seems to be nourished by a deep, invisible river of sorrow. And that overwhelming perfume in the air, that intoxicating scent of orange blossoms, it now seems to be working overtime. It's not just masking the stench of the city outside the walls. It's trying to cover up something much closer, the smell of sweat, fear, and human despair. It's a scented lie, designed to make you forget the price of paradise. You drift towards the source of that pervasive, beautiful scent. Your path takes you into a vast grove of bitter orange trees, the Citrus aurantium. They are planted in perfectly straight, endlessly repeating rows, creating a hypnotic pattern of dark green leaves, pale, waxy blossoms, and the occasional glint of unripened green fruit. The air here is thick and sweet, so fragrant that it feels like you are breathing in a liquid perfume. This is the scent that has defined your entire experience since stepping through the main gate. It's the smell of romance, of poetry, of idyllic Moroccan nights. The illusion is one of pure, unadulterated aesthetic pleasure. It's a perfumer's paradise, a place designed to delight and soothe the senses. You can imagine courtiers walking here in the evening, the air heavy with this intoxicating aroma, composing love poems or simply losing themselves in the sheer sensory beauty of it all. It feels like the most luxurious and decadent part of the garden, a grove dedicated entirely to the creation of beauty. But the shocking reality is that this entire grove, hundreds, maybe thousands of trees, is not primarily about romance. It's about public health, or rather, a desperate and misguided attempt at it. This isn't just a perfumery, it's a massive, industrial-scale production facility for a medieval hazmat suit. The key product here isn't the fruit, It's the neroli oil, distilled from these very blossoms. And that oil was used for one of the most curious and revealing accessories of the 17th century, the perfumed glove. You can picture the Sultan now, or one of his high-ranking officials, clad in fine silk robes. On his hands, he wears a pair of exquisitely soft leather gloves. But these aren't for warmth or for work. They are drenched, saturated, in this potent orange blossom oil. When he needs to move through the palace, or more importantly, through the city, he holds his gloved hand up to his nose and breathes through it. The why takes us right back to the terror of the miasma theory. Remember, they believe that foul odors, the stench of sickness and decay, are what transmit disease. How, then, do you navigate a world full of unavoidable, dangerous smells? You create a portable cloud of good air to carry with you. The perfumed glove was the 17th century equivalent of a 95 mask. It was a personal, mobile air purification system. The logic was simple. If you can only smell the pure, clean, healthy scent of orange blossom, then the dangerous miasmas from the street, from a sick person, from a piece of rotting meat, cannot enter your body. The intense fragrance of the neroli oil was believed to create an impenetrable barrier against the invisible poisons of the air. It wasn't about fashion. It was about survival. High-ranking individuals would have their gloves, their handkerchiefs, even the pommels of their swords, constantly rescented. This entire grove, then, is a strategic resource. It's a vital part of the state's defense infrastructure, as important as the fortress walls or the army. The process was laborious. The blossoms had to be picked at the perfect moment, just as they opened. They were then subjected to steam distillation in copper alembics, a process that required vast amounts of blossoms to produce a tiny amount of precious oil. The unseen hands you thought of earlier were surely here, sweltering in the heat, carefully picking these delicate flowers all day long, their fingers sticky with nectar. The fragrant grove, the symbol of poetic love, is in fact a highly practical, deeply paranoid public health project. Every beautiful blossom is a tiny weapon in the war against a deadly, foul-smelling enemy. The scent is not a luxury, it is a shield. And as you stand there, enveloped in this cloud of fragrance, you notice the high walls and latticed screens that enclose this part of the garden are even more imposing. This sweet scent is meant to protect the men who rule, but it also contains another world entirely politically charged, isolated, and often dangerous realm of the royal harem. You find yourself standing before a set of tall, ornately carved wooden doors, guarded by two imposing men who are clearly not ordinary soldiers. They are eunuchs, their faces smooth and impassive, their gaze distant yet unnervingly sharp. Behind these doors lies the most secret and mythologized part of the palace, the harem. From where you stand, you can hear the faint sounds of laughter, the murmur of female voices, and the melodic plucking of an oud. The air that seeps from under the door is even more densely perfumed than the rest of the garden, a heady mix of rosewater, amber, and musk. The illusion of the harem, perpetuated by centuries of European art and fantasy, is one of sensual paradise. It's imagined as a place of endless leisure and luxurious indolence, a private pleasure garden for the Sultan, filled with beautiful, compliant women who spend their days bathing in milk, eating sweetmeats and competing for his affection. It is seen as the ultimate male fantasy, a gilded cage of pampered beauties with no purpose other than to please their master. But as those heavy doors swing open for a moment to admit a servant girl, you catch a glimpse inside. You see not a scene of languid sensuality, but a complex and bustling society. The shocking reality is that the harem was not just a pleasure den, it was a political powerhouse, a viper's nest of ambition, and one of the most dangerous places in the entire kingdom. Moulay Ismail's harem was legendary in its scale, reputedly housing over 500 concubines and wives. But these women were not just passive objects of desire. They were players in a high-stakes game of influence and succession. The harem was a self-contained matriarchal world, with its own strict hierarchies, its own laws, and its own ruthless politics. The most powerful woman was not necessarily the Sultan's current favorite, but his mother. Below her were the mothers of his eldest sons, each vying for her child to be named the heir. Every new child born within these walls was not just a baby, it was a potential future sultan, and a threat to every other contender. The why behind this strange and volatile system was, once again, a matter of brutal statecraft. The Sultan did not have a single, designated queen whose son would automatically inherit the throne, as was common in Europe. Instead, by fathering hundreds of sons with hundreds of different women, he created a vast pool of potential heirs. This fostered intense competition, not just among the sons themselves, but more importantly, among their mothers. A concubine who managed to get her son recognized by the Sultan gained immense status, wealth, and power. She could command servants, influence policy, and secure a luxurious future for herself and her family. The harem, therefore, was a hotbed of conspiracy. Alliances were constantly being formed and broken. Whispers in the garden's secluded corners were more potent than declarations in the council chamber. A woman might use her influence with the Sultan to ruin a rival minister, or to promote a general who secretly supported her son's claim. This beautiful, perfumed space was a battleground. The weapons were not swords, but secrets, rumors, and sometimes poison. A rival's food might be tampered with. A whispered accusation of infidelity, a crime punishable by immediate and brutal death, could eliminate a competitor. The women of the harem were not just lounging, they were constantly maneuvering, observing, and plotting. They were intelligence gatherers, political strategists, and kingmakers. The fragrant blossoms that climbed the walls of their private courtyards have likely overheard more state secrets than any vizier. The sweet music could not drown out the bitter rivalries. The gilded cage was, in fact, an arena, and the prize was the throne itself. As you contemplate this hidden world of female power and peril, you turn your gaze back toward the more public parts of the garden, where you see a new group arriving, a delegation of foreign emissaries, dressed in heavy European finery, sweating under the Moroccan sun. They are being led to a beautiful pavilion, no doubt for a display of hospitality. But you're starting to understand that in this garden, nothing is ever as it seems, and a welcoming gesture can be the most dangerous move of all. Your attention is drawn to a magnificent open-sided pavilion set in a pristine corner of the garden. Its roof is a masterpiece of carved and painted cedarwood, supported by slender marble columns. The floor is a sea of intricate green and white sellige tile work, cool under the shade. Inside, low divans covered in rich brocades and silk cushions are arranged around inlaid tables. Servants in immaculate white robes move silently, placing silver trays laden with dates, nuts, and delicate pastries. At the center of the pavilion, a smaller version of the main fountain bubbles softly, its only purpose to cool the air and provide a soothing soundtrack. A delegation of European ambassadors, probably French or English, are being ushered into this space. They look stiff and uncomfortable in their woolen coats and elaborate wigs, beads of sweat glistening on their foreheads. They are greeted by a high-ranking Moroccan vizier, all smiles and gracious gestures. The scene is the very picture of refined diplomacy. The illusion is one of mutual respect, of a civilized exchange between powerful nations, a meeting of equals in a setting designed to foster peace and understanding. The Sultan is honoring his foreign guests by receiving them in his private paradise, a gesture of profound goodwill. But look closer at the faces of the ambassadors. Beneath their formal expressions, there is a deep-seated anxiety. Notice how they only nibble at the food, how their eyes dart around. The shocking reality is that this is not a friendly diplomatic meeting, it is a high-stakes hostage negotiation, and everyone in the pavilion knows it. The beautiful setting, the lavish hospitality, it's all just window dressing for a tense and often terrifying process. The primary reason for these European embassies was not to discuss trade or alliances, it was to beg, plead, and pay for the release of their countrymen, the thousands of Christian sailors and citizens captured by the Barbary corsairs and now languishing in Ismail's slave pens, the very men who may have built the pavilion they are now sitting in, the whys rooted in the Sultan's brutal but highly effective foreign policy. For Moulay Ismail, the Christian slaves were not just a labor force, they were a form of currency. They were his primary leverage over the powerful maritime nations of Europe. England, France, Spain, and Holland were constantly at war with each other, but they were all vulnerable to the lightning-fast raids of the corsairs from Sul and Rabat. The Sultan held the citizens of his enemies captive and used them as bargaining chips. Do you want your people back? Then you will pay a handsome ransom in gold, silver, and, most importantly, modern weaponry, cannons, muskets, and gunpowder that he could then use to further solidify his own power. The entire diplomatic dance was a finely calibrated exercise in extortion. So this reception in the garden is not a gesture of friendship, it's a power play. The lavish display of wealth, silk, the silver, the bubbling fountain is designed to intimidate the visitors, to show them the futility of a military solution. The graciousness of the vizier is a thin veil over an iron-clad threat. Pay what we demand, or your people will die here, toiling in the sun. The food itself is a source of anxiety. While the risk of deliberate poisoning by the hosts was low, a dead ambassador creates more problems than he solves. The ever-present danger of foodborne illness, as you know from the fountain, was very real. More terrifying for the ambassadors was the Sultan himself. He might make an appearance, or he might not. If he did, a single wrong word, a breach of protocol, or a gift he deemed insufficient could lead to the immediate failure of the mission or worse. Accounts from ambassadors of the time are filled with terror, describing how the Sultan would casually mention the gruesome punishments he inflicted for minor offences, a clear warning to his guests. The beautiful, peaceful garden pavilion is, in fact, an interrogation room. It is a stage for psychological warfare, where the scent of jasmine and mint masks the cold, hard reality of a shakedown. The sweet tea they are served is brewed with the bitter tears of their captive countrymen. As you watch this tense performance, you can't help but notice the sheer variety of plants in the garden, not just the fragrant and beautiful ones, but smaller, more humble herbs growing in designated beds. This place is not just for show. It is a living collection, a library of botanical knowledge. It's a pharmacy. And in the 17th century, the line between a remedy and a poison is perilously thin. You wander away from the diplomatic theatre and into a more secluded, functional part of the garden. Here, the grand symmetry gives way to a more practical layout. The plants are arranged in raised beds, neatly labelled with small, carved wooden markers that you can't read. This area lacks the show-stopping beauty of the rose arbours and the orange groves, but it has a quiet, serious purpose. You see an old man with a deeply lined face, a master herbalist perhaps, moving slowly along the rows. He pinches a leaf here, sniffs a blossom there, and carefully cuts a stem, placing it in a woven basket. He is surrounded by a vast and living pharmacopoeia. There's the familiar, clean scent of mint and verbena, used for infusions to soothe the stomach. You can identify chamomile, its feathery leaves promising a peaceful sleep. There are rows of lavender for calming nerves and scenting linens. The illusion is that of a healing sanctuary, a place where nature's gentle bounty is harnessed for health and wellness. It's a holistic, organic approach to medicine, a testament to the ancient and sophisticated botanical knowledge of Moroccan healers. It feels safe, wise, and profoundly connected to the earth. But as you look more closely at the plants in the herbalist's basket, you see things that are not so benign. Alongside the mint, there is a sprig of foxglove, its beautiful, bell-shaped flowers containing a potent cardiac poison. Next to it is a cutting from a castor oil plant, from whose beans the deadly poison resin is derived. You see the glossy leaves of belladonna, or deadly nightshade, whose berries can cause delirium and death. The shocking reality is that this healing garden is also a poison garden. The very same plants used to create life-saving remedies were, with a slightly different preparation or a marginally higher dose, lethal. The master herbalist is not just a healer, he is also a potential poisoner, holding the knowledge of life and death in his stained fingers. The line between a medicine and a toxin was dangerously, almost invisibly, thin. The why for this lies in the trial and error nature of pre-modern medicine. Without the ability to isolate and synthesize active ingredients, healers relied on whole plants. They knew through generations of observation that a tea made from willow bark could reduce a fever. They didn't know it contained salicin, the precursor to aspirin. They knew that a tiny, carefully measured dose of foxglove could steady a fluttering heart, but too much would stop it completely. Medicine was a dangerous art, a constant dance on the edge of a razor blade. The concept of a side effect was not well understood. If a medicine caused convulsions or vomiting, it was often seen as a sign that it was working, purging the evil humours from the body. The same plants used to treat a stomach ailment could, in the wrong hands or with a slight miscalculation, become the perfect, untraceable murder weapon. Remember the political intrigue of the harem, the constant struggle for succession. A concubine seeking to eliminate a rival's son wouldn't use a dagger. She would bribe a servant to introduce a few extra drops of a seemingly medicinal tincture into his food. Remember the tense diplomatic negotiations. A desperate European power, frustrated with the Sultan's demands, might try to covertly eliminate a key advisor. The healing garden was a source of immense power, and therefore, immense danger. The herbalist himself would have been a figure of both respect and fear. His knowledge was essential to the health of the court, but it also made him a potential accomplice in its darkest conspiracies. Every soothing balm had its lethal counterpart. The calming scent of lavender might be mixed with something far more sinister. The garden, which promises health and longevity, is also the source of the court's most secret and deadly weapons. As you absorb this duality, this fine line between healing and harming, your eyes are drawn back to the overall design of the garden. The perfect lines, the rigid squares, the symmetrical paths. You start to see that this isn't just an aesthetic choice. It's a statement. The very geometry of the garden is a reflection of the unbending, absolute power that created it. You pull back, ascending a set of stairs to a rooftop terrace that overlooks the entire garden complex. From this vantage point, the grand design becomes clear. It's a breathtaking display of order and control. The garden is laid out in a perfect, four-part plan, a charba symbolizing the four gardens of paradise described in the Quran. Water channels, straight as rulers, divide the space into four equal quadrants. Each quadrant is then further subdivided into a rigorous grid of squares and rectangles, defined by clipped hedges and tiled pathways. The trees are not planted in naturalistic clumps, but in strict, geometric formations. The central fountain is the precise, unambiguous heart of it all. From up here, the garden looks less like a work of nature and more like a vast, living blueprint. The illusion is one of divine harmony and mathematical perfection. It speaks of a mind that appreciates order, balance, and beauty, a ruler who seeks to replicate the perfection of heaven on earth. It feels like a space designed for contemplation, where the logical, predictable layout can calm the mind and elevate the soul. But as you trace those rigid lines with your eyes, you start to feel their cold, unyielding nature. The shocking reality is that this geometry is not about peace, it's about power. This isn't the geometry of a philosopher, it's the geometry of a tyrant. Each razor-straight path, each perfectly squared hedge, each tree forced into a designated spot is a physical manifestation of the Sultan's absolute and unforgiving control. This garden is a microcosm of his kingdom. In this space, everything and everyone has a designated place. There is no room for deviation, for wildness, for individuality. The tree that grows crooked is either brutally pruned back into line, or it is uprooted and replaced. A path that meanders is a flaw to be corrected. The garden's design is a constant, silent declaration that the ruler's will is supreme, capable of taming not just men, but nature itself. The why is deeply embedded in the psychology of absolute monarchy. A ruler like Moulay Ismail, who holds the power of life and death over millions, sees the world as something to be ordered according to his vision. The messy, chaotic, unpredictable nature of the world outside his palace walls, the tribal rebellions, the European intrigues, the famines and the plagues is a constant challenge to his authority. But here, within his garden, his control is total. He can command a tree to grow in a perfect line, and it does. He can command water to flow in a straight channel, and it does. The garden is his perfect kingdom in miniature, a place where his will is made manifest and undeniable. It is a psychological refuge for a control freak of monumental proportions. The rigid symmetry is a reassurance that order can be imposed on chaos, that his power is, in fact, absolute. This philosophy extended from plants to people. The social structure of his court was just as rigid and unforgiving as the garden's layout. Every courtier, every servant, every soldier had a precise rank and a specific role. To step outside of that designated place, to show too much ambition or individuality, was as offensive as a weed in a perfect flower bed, and the punishment was just as swift. The vizier must stand here. The guard must stand there. The concubine must not be seen by the ambassador. The gardener must remain invisible. The relentless geometry of the paths and hedges is a map of the social order, rigid, hierarchical, and with no room for movement. The beauty of the pattern is the beauty of submission. Every living thing in this space, from the most powerful minister down to the smallest blade of grass, is subject to the same unbending rule. As dusk begins to settle, the sharp lines of the garden begin to blur. The sun dips below the high walls and long, deep shadows stretch across the tiled paths. The geometry of the day is giving way to the shapelessness of night, and you sense that with the darkness, a new set of rules and a new set of dangers will emerge. The sun has finally disappeared, and a deep indigo sky settles over the garden. The transition is shockingly swift. The familiar, sun-drenched paradise you've been exploring all day has vanished, replaced by an entirely new and unsettling landscape. The air cools rapidly, and the dense perfumes of jasmine and orange blossom seem to grow heavier, almost cloying, in the stillness. A few flickering oil lamps are lit by silent servants, their small pools of light only serving to make the surrounding darkness deeper and more absolute. The cheerful, bubbling sound of the fountains now seems lonely, almost mournful. The illusion you might expect is one of romance and mystery. This is the Garden of the Arabian Nights, a place for secret trysts between lovers, for poets to contemplate the moon, for the Sultan to walk in quiet reflection under the stars. The darkness should be a soft, velvety blanket, turning the familiar space into a magical, intimate realm. But as you peer into the inky blackness between the lamps, a primal sense of unease creeps in. Your eyes can't penetrate the shadows. The rustle of leaves might be the wind, or it might be someone hiding, watching. A sudden snap of a twig nearby makes you jump. The shocking reality is that the garden at night is not a place of romance. It is a place of profound paranoia and hidden threat. The darkness does not bring peace, it brings fear. For the inhabitants of the palace, the night transforms the garden from a symbol of control into a realm of uncertainty. Every shadow can hide an assassin. Every corner can conceal a conspirator. Remember the bitter rivalries of the harem, the jostling for power among the viziers. The night is when plots are hatched and executed. An enemy you can see in the bright light of day is one thing. An enemy who can lurk, unseen, just a few feet away, is another thing entirely. The wise, simple human psychology, amplified by the high-stakes political environment. The Sultan, for all his absolute power, was deeply paranoid. He trusted no one. He knew that the same terror he used to control his subjects could be turned against him. He reportedly slept in a different room every night to avoid assassination. His fear was not unfounded. His long reign was punctuated by rebellions, including those led by his own sons. For him, and for his courtiers, the darkness was not a friend. It was a shroud for betrayal. The guards who patrol the garden at night are not there to keep intruders out. They are there to watch for threats from within. Their lanterns cut sharp, fleeting paths through the gloom, their eyes constantly scanning the endless hiding places created by the very hedges and pavilions that are so beautiful in the day. The very design that symbolized control by day now facilitates danger by night. The maze-like hedges are no longer a delightful feature. They are a perfect network for an ambush. The dark, silent water of the central pool could easily conceal a body. The secluded alcoves, perfect for a quiet chat in the afternoon, are now ideal spots for a secret, treasonous meeting. The fragrant paradise becomes a landscape of fear. No one would walk these paths alone at night for pleasure. Every step is taken with caution. Every sound is analyzed. The sweet smell of the blossoms can't cover the scent of fear. The night erases the tyrant's comforting geometry, returning the garden to a state of wildness where the predator, whether it be a man with a knife or a whispered rumor, has the advantage. As you stand there, wrapped in the oppressive darkness, a new scent reaches you, carried on the night air from the direction of the palace kitchens. It's the rich, interesting aroma of roasting lamb, saffron, and a dozen other exotic spices. A royal banquet is being prepared. It promises a retreat from the darkness into a world of light and flavor, but you have a growing suspicion that even a feast in this palace will be laden with its own hidden dangers. You follow the enticing aroma, leaving the dark, paranoid garden behind and entering the palace proper. You find yourself in a vast hall, brilliantly lit by hundreds of oil lamps and candles. The walls are covered in shimmering tilework, and the air hums with the conversation and music of a royal banquet. The Sultan is presiding, seated on a raised platform, but the atmosphere here is more relaxed, almost jovial. Long, low tables are groaning under the weight of enormous platters. You see mountains of fluffy couscous studded with vegetables, tagines of chicken cooked with preserved lemons and olives, and the centerpiece, whole lambs, slow roasted until the meat is falling off the bone, glistening with honey and spices. The air is intoxicating, a rich tapestry of scent saffron, ginger, cumin, cinnamon, turmeric. The illusion is one of boundless opulence and Epicurean delight. It is a feast designed to showcase the wealth of the kingdom and the generosity of its ruler. The sheer abundance of food, the vibrant colors, and the exotic flavors are a celebration of life and prosperity, a stark contrast to the dark, fearful garden you just left. But as you watch the guests tear off pieces of bread and dip them into the communal dishes, you notice the sheer intensity of the spicing. The lamb isn't just seasoned. It's practically encased in a thick crust of herbs and spices. The chicken tagine is swimming in a sauce so pungent with ginger and saffron that it almost makes your eyes water. The shocking reality is that this lavish use of spices, while delicious, is also serving a desperate, practical purpose: to hide the taste of decay. In an age before refrigeration, keeping meat fresh was a constant, losing battle. The lamb being served tonight might have been slaughtered this morning, but it has been sitting in the heat all day. The chicken may have been a day or two past its prime. The risk of food poisoning, of salmonella, of E. coli, of pneumonia is an ever-present part of every single meal, from the most humble bowl of soup to the Sultan's grandest feast. The why is a combination of technological limitations and culinary tradition. Without cold storage, the only way to preserve food was through salting, drying, or pickling. For a grand feast, however, fresh meat was a requirement of status, so they were in a race against time and bacteria. Spices were not just a luxury, they were a necessity. A heavy hand with the cumin, coriander, and cinnamon could mask the slightly off flavor of meat that was beginning to turn. These spices, brought by caravan across the Sahara or by ship from the Far East, were incredibly expensive, a symbol of immense wealth. So their lavish use served a dual purpose. It demonstrated the Sultan's riches, while simultaneously making potentially hazardous food palatable. The guests, for their part, were likely accustomed to these risks. A bout of violent stomach upset after a feast was a common, if unpleasant, part of life. They simply had no other choice. The entire banquet is a gastronomic gamble. Each delicious mouthful is a roll of the dice. The sweet, fragrant spices that you associate with exotic, refined cuisine are here being employed as a form of delicious camouflage, a fragrant shroud for meat that is teetering on the edge of putrefaction. The royal physicians would be on hand, not just as a sign of prestige, but because it was highly likely their services would be needed before the night was over. Remember the healing and poison garden? The mint and chamomile you saw were probably being brewed into massive pots of tea right now, ready to soothe the inevitable wave of indigestion and diarrhea that would follow the feast. So as you watch the happy, feasting crowd, you see the scene with new eyes. This isn't just a party, it's an act of collective denial. They are literally spicing over the evidence of decay, swallowing down the risks along with the rich food. Your gaze falls upon one of the courtiers, a man dressed in a stunning robe of deep blue silk, embroidered with silver thread. He looks magnificent, the very picture of clean, aristocratic elegance, but you've learned by now that every surface in this palace hides a grubbier truth. You focus on that courtier, the man in the beautiful blue silk robe. He is a picture of effortless grace. His garment, a flowing kaftan, shimmers in the candlelight, its silver embroidery catching the light with every subtle movement. His posture is impeccable. His hands, when they emerge from his voluminous sleeves to partake in the feast, are clean. He wears soft leather slippers, dyed a rich yellow. He is the very embodiment of the glamorous illusion of courtly life, clean, refined, and utterly elegant. He smells not of the city's grime or his own sweat, but faintly of the neroli oil from the perfumed gloves and perhaps a touch of musk or ambergris. He seems to exist on a different plane from the dusty, sweaty world of ordinary people. His entire presentation is designed to communicate his status, his wealth, and his purity, his separation from the filth of the common world. But now, let's pull back that luxurious silk curtain. The shocking reality is that beneath this stunningly beautiful robe, the man is almost certainly filthy. Personal hygiene, as you would understand it, simply does not exist. That magnificent kaftan might be washed once a month, if he's particularly fastidious. More likely it is simply aired out. His undergarments, if he is wearing any, would be changed infrequently, and the man himself, he does not bathe. At least, not in the way you do. The concept of a daily, private bath with soap and hot water is a distant, unimaginable luxury. While the palace has hammams or public bathhouses, they were not used for daily cleansing in the modern sense. They were more of a social and ritual space, and the process of steaming, scraping, and rinsing was an occasional event, not a daily routine. Furthermore, soap was a harsh, lye-based substance, not something you'd want to use on your body every day. The why is a complex mix of culture, technology, and belief. Water, as you know, is a precious commodity. The vast amounts needed for daily, full-body bathing for the entire court were simply not practical. More importantly, the miasma theory comes into play once again. There was a genuine belief among some that immersing the body in hot water could open the pores and make one more susceptible to the bad air and the diseases it carried. It was seen as a potentially risky activity. Cleanliness was more about ritual than sanitation. The wudu, the ritual ablutions before prayer, were essential. This involved washing the hands, face, arms, and feet. This was done 5 times a day and provided a surface-level cleanliness. But the torso, the back, the hair, these parts of the body were washed far less frequently. Deodorant, of course, does not exist. So, how did they manage the inevitable, powerful smell of an unwashed body? The answer is the very thing that creates the illusion: perfume and clothing. The flowing, multi-layered robes were not just for modesty or style, they were a form of ventilation, allowing air to circulate. And more importantly, the fabrics themselves were heavily perfumed. Remember the perfumed gloves? The same principle applied to all clothing. The silks and fine wools were stored with sachets of dried lavender, cloves, and musk. They were fumigated with burning incense and oud wood. The goal was not to eliminate body odor, but to overpower it with a more pleasant, and far more expensive, smell. The entire culture of perfumery, which seems so refined, was in large part a sophisticated system of olfactory camouflage. The elegance of the courtier is a triumph of scent-masking technology. His stunning robe is not just a status symbol, it's a beautifully embroidered, silver-threaded stink dampener. The cloud of expensive perfume surrounding him is in a constant battle with the reality of the unwashed body beneath. As you ponder this, your ears catch a sound from the gardens, carried through an open window. It's not the gentle sound of the fountain, or the rustle of leaves. It's something deeper, a low growl that cuts through the noise of the banquet, a reminder that the garden has other, non-human inhabitants. The low, guttural roar from the garden snags your attention, a primal sound that feels utterly out of place amidst the manicured perfection. You leave the banquet hall and venture back out into the night, drawn toward the source of the sound. You find yourself near a section of the garden you hadn't seen before, enclosed by a thick, high wall. The air here smells different. The sweet floral perfumes are still present, but they are undercut by a heavy, musky, animal scent, a wild and feral odor that speaks of sweat, fur, and raw meat. Peering through a heavily barred gate, you see the source. In a series of stone-walled enclosures, the Sultan keeps his menagerie. The illusion is one of majestic power. You see a magnificent Barbary lion, the source of the roar, pacing restlessly. In another pit, a leopard rests on a rock, its spotted coat a masterpiece of natural design. There are gazelles, ostriches, and exotic birds in gilded cages. This is the ultimate status symbol, a collection of nature's most powerful and beautiful creatures, a living testament to the Sultan's reach. He can not only command men and bend nature to his will in the form of gardens, but he can also possess the kings of the animal world. This menagerie is his personal zoo, a place of wonder and a potent symbol of his dominion over all living things. The nightingale's song and the lion's roar, both contained within his paradise. But your eyes adjust to the dim torchlight, and you look past the magnificent animals to the state of their enclosures. The shocking reality is that this majestic zoo is also a festering pit of filth and cruelty. The stone floors are littered with gnawed bones, rotting scraps of meat, and piles of animal waste. The stench, once you focus on it past the garden's perfumes, is overwhelming. The water troughs are slimy and green. Swarms of flies buzz over everything. The animals, while symbols of power, are also prisoners living in squalor. There are no veterinarians, no concept of animal enrichment or proper habitat. An animal that got sick was simply left to die. An animal that became aggressive or unmanageable was killed. Their lives were nasty, brutish, and short, all in the service of propping up the Sultan's image. The why is a complete lack of a modern conservationist or animal welfare worldview. These creatures were not seen as elements of a fragile ecosystem to be preserved. They were commodities, curiosities, and symbols. The lion was not an animal to be respected in its own right. It was a living emblem of royalty and strength, and its purpose was to be seen and to impress visitors. The idea of providing a clean, humane environment for a captive wild animal would have been absurd. The focus was on the acquisition and display, not the care. Furthermore, these animals served a more sinister purpose. They were an extension of the Sultan's system of terror. Unpopular courtiers or condemned prisoners were not always simply beheaded. A particularly gruesome and theatrical way to dispatch an enemy was to have them thrown to the lions. The menagerie was not just a zoo, it was another instrument of execution, another stage for the performance of absolute power. So the beautiful nightingale you might hear singing in a cypress tree exists in the same garden as a half-starved, half-mad lion pacing in its own filth. The delicate gazelle, a symbol of grace and poetry, lives just a stone's throw from a pit where its natural predator is kept. The waste from these enclosures, a constant source of foul odors and disease-carrying pests, has to be shoveled out by the same unseen hands who tend the perfect hedges. The garden's perfume is in a constant war, not just against the city's miasma, but against the stench generated within its own walls. The entire glorious garden, this supposed paradise on earth, is an ecosystem of contradictions. It is a place of sublime beauty and abject squalor, of poetic inspiration and brutal executions, of fragrant blossoms and festering waste. It is a man-made heaven built by a ruler whose power seems almost divine, yet whose methods are profoundly, terrifyingly earthly. This very contradiction raises a final, troubling question. How does a society that places God at the center of everything reconcile this beautiful, heavenly symbol with the unholy brutality used to create and maintain it? You stand in a quiet corner of the garden, where the grand avenues give way to a small, almost hidden courtyard. In the center, a simple stone basin for ablutions. On one side, an arched alcove, a mihrab, is built into the wall, its internal geometry pointing unerringly across the miles toward Mecca. The floor here is not laid with flashy, colorful tiles, but with humble, worn terracotta, cool and clean. The air is still and thick with the scent of a single, ancient lemon tree. This is a space for prayer. The illusion here is perhaps the most powerful and profound in the entire garden. It is the illusion of pure piety. This garden, in its very conception, is an act of faith. The four-part charbagh design is a direct architectural translation of Jannah, the paradise promised in the Quran. The water channels are the four rivers of heaven. The fruit trees, the shade, the fragrant savory element is a carefully chosen symbol meant to evoke the divine and turn the heart toward God. This is not just a rich man's backyard. It is a sermon delivered in water, stone, and blossom. It is a sanctuary, a place where the soul can find peace, a physical reminder of the ultimate reward for a faithful life. It is intended as a holy space. But as you stand in this quiet, sacred corner, you can't shut out the echoes of everything you've seen. You try to reconcile the serene piety of this space with the man who commanded its creation. How can this glimpse of heaven be the personal project of a ruler renowned for his hellish cruelty? The shocking reality is that this sacred garden is a monument to a profound and troubling hypocrisy. The ground on which you stand, dedicated to prayer and contemplation, was cleared and leveled by enslaved men who were denied their own freedom. The water that flows in the channels, symbolizing the rivers of paradise, is the same water that carries disease. The serene alcoves were stages for executions. The unseen hands that keep these prayer stones clean belong to people living in constant fear. The entire pious project is underwritten by means of unimaginable brutality. It is a holy symbol built with unholy hands for an unholy master. It is an impious oasis. How is this possible? How could a deeply religious society, led by a man who called himself the commander of the faithful, square this circle? The why is a formidable piece of political and religious ideology, the kind that can justify almost anything. The Sultan, Moulay Ismail, was not just a king, he was seen as a holder of the Baraka, a kind of divine grace or blessing, inherited through his lineage as a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. His authority was not just political, it was sacred. Therefore, his actions were not judged by the standards of ordinary men. When he plunged his lance into a clumsy servant, it wasn't seen as murder, it was framed as the swift and righteous judgment of God's anointed representative on earth. He was not breaking God's laws, he was enforcing them. The greatest evil in the political and religious vocabulary of the time was fitnath, chaos, sedition, and civil war that tears the community of believers apart. The memory of the anarchy that preceded his reign was fresh and terrifying. Therefore, the Sultan's primary religious duty was to prevent fitna at all costs. His legendary brutality was justified as the necessary, surgical violence required to impose divine order on a fractured and rebellious land. The terror he inspired was simply a tool to maintain the sacred unity of the nation. It's a chillingly effective philosophy. The perfect, unbending geometry of the garden you saw earlier is the ultimate symbol of this belief. It is the visual representation of order triumphing over chaos, of the Sultan's will triumphing over the wildness of nature and the rebelliousness of man. The garden is not hypocritical, it is the perfect expression of his worldview. And so, a courtier could kneel on these prayer stones, facing Mecca, and see no contradiction. The garden's beauty was a testament to the glory of Islam. The Sultan's power, which made the garden possible, was a testament to God's favor. The suffering of the thousands of Christian and African slaves who built it, a regrettable but necessary cost in the grand project of strengthening the faith and the kingdom against its enemies. The piety of the symbol was allowed to float serenely above the brutality of its substance. But as you stand here, watching a faint breeze stir the leaves of the old lemon tree, you realize that all the justifications, all the power, all the terror, and all the beauty are subject to a force even more absolute than the Sultan. This man-made paradise, for all its claims to divine sanction, is still a part of the mortal world. And in the mortal world, nothing, no matter how perfectly designed or brutally enforced, lasts forever. You stay there for a long moment, by the humble prayer stones, under the ancient lemon tree. The entire garden, with all its contradictions, seems to hold its breath around you. The monumental walls, the perfect geometry, the sheer, overwhelming force of will that it took to impose this vision onto the landscape, it all feels permanent, indestructible. The illusion is that this place has achieved a kind of immortality. A century from now, 5 centuries from now, surely it will still be here, a timeless testament to a golden age. The stone is solid, the water channels are deep, the design is eternal. It feels as if the Sultan has not just built a garden, but has conquered time itself, creating a small, perfect pocket of forever. This, you think, is what true power looks like. The power to make something that lasts. But this is the final, and perhaps most potent, illusion of all. The shocking reality is that this paradise is breathtakingly fragile. Its perfection is not self-sustaining. It is an unnatural state, maintained only by constant, brutal, relentless effort. And the moment that effort ceases, the entire illusion will collapse with astonishing speed. Let's imagine, just for a moment, that you close your eyes, and in that moment, 50 years pass. The blink of an eye in the life of a stone pavilion, a mere sapling's youth for a suppressed tree. Now, open them. The garden is gone. Or rather, it is being unmade, devoured by the very nature it sought to tame. The razor-straight water channels are choked with weeds and filled with stagnant, scummy water. The intricate tile paths are cracked and shattered, pushed apart by stubborn roots. The meticulously sculpted hedges have exploded into a wild, tangled mass of woody branches, their geometric precision a forgotten dream. The pavilions are crumbling, their painted ceilings faded and flaking, their marble columns stained and leaning. The air is no longer thick with curated perfumes, but with the smell of damp earth, of decay, and the wild, sharp scent of unchecked growth. It smells like a ruin. What happened? The why is the story of all systems built on the will of a single, absolute tyrant. In 1727, Moulay Ismail, the man of terrifying energy, the force that held this entire world together, died. The result was not a smooth transition, but the very fitna he had spent his life suppressing. His sons, those bitter rivals born and raised in the harem's political crucible, immediately turned on each other, plunging the empire into decades of bloody civil war. The new sultan moved the capital away from Meccans. And just like that, the resources, the focus, the political will, and the fear that kept this garden pristine, all vanished. The vast army of slaves and labourers was disbanded, repurposed, or simply left to drift away. No one was left to trim the hedges. No one was left to sweep the paths. No one was left to dredge the canals or repair the fountains. The garden, which was never a natural ecosystem, began to die. The plants that required constant watering shriveled in the sun. The hardier, wilder weeds, which had been ruthlessly suppressed for decades, staged a triumphant comeback. The expensive, imported blossoms were choked out by common thistles. Nature, which had been held back by an iron fist, simply reclaimed its territory. The garden's perfection was a lie, not because it was ugly underneath, but because it was temporary. Its existence was tied directly to the lifespan of one man. It was not a monument to God's eternal paradise, but a testament to the fleeting, transient nature of human power. The dust you saw on the hot city streets when you first arrived, the chaos you sought to escape, that was the true, enduring reality. This garden was just a brief, beautiful, violent interruption. A single orange blossom, a descendant of the trees from the Sultan's great perfumed grove, detaches from a wild, overgrown branch. It drifts down, not onto a clean, shimmering tile, but into a patch of damp moss and fallen leaves. And there, it begins to soften, to darken, to dissolve. It becomes one with the rich, dark soil, turning, as all things do, back into the dust of blossoms from which it came.